Welcome to You Make the Difference. I'm Wanda Walker, and I have as my guest today Oz Hillman. Oz is the president of Marketplace Leaders, headquartered in Atlanta, and he also is the author of 14 books and sends out a daily devotional email to over 200,000 subscribers worldwide. We're so glad to have you on the program, Oz.
Great to be here, Wanda.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And we're going to talk about a book that you've written, Change Agent, and it's engaging your passion to be one who makes a difference.
That's right.
And I certainly like that because our show is You Make the Difference.
Oh.
And, yes, and we highlight people on the show that we know are making a difference in society. So your book really talks about Christian people making a difference in all areas of society: government, business, education, family, culture, which is arts and entertainment, media, and the church. So let's start off by defining what a change agent is.
Well, it's much like what your program says, you know, someone who's making a difference, but a change agent can be either negative or positive. You
Yes.
know, Saddam Hussein was a change agent, and you know, there's a lot of people that have been change agents and not so good of change agents.
Yes.
But we're talking about, you know, helping people understand how they can make a difference in the world and really have a influence in the culture in a very positive way. And you know, when we look at who Jesus Christ was, he made a huge difference
Yes.
by solving problems. And one of the things in the book I talk about is that one of the key ways that we can be change agents is be problem solvers in our society and helping to solve problems in our community. Because when you do that, that's how you have influence in your community. People don't care who solves their problem, they just want their problem solved. And if you can do that, you can actually have more influence in the culture.
Yes, you gain a real high place when you can solve problems, don't you?
Right.
Let's talk about some of the different areas that we can impact, and let's talk about family. We know the importance of family, and we know the importance of having godly men in our family, role models. During the summer, we did a program where we talked about how important fathers were and that leadership is. And you compare two men in your book, one who is an atheist and one who is a Christian leader. And would you just give us that comparison and show how their life played out there, and even played out in their lineage?
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and a friend of mine shared this with me, and I included it in the book. It's a comparison of a man named Max Jukes compared to Jonathan Edwards, and just listen to the difference in these two families. Max Jukes married an atheist woman. He had 560 descendants, 310 died as paupers, 150 as criminals, 7 murderers, 100 drunkards. Half of the women were prostitutes, and they cost the U.S. government $1.2 million in 19th century dollars.
Yes.
But Jonathan Edwards' life, he married a godly woman, had 1,394 descendants, 295 graduated from college, 13 college presidents, 65 professors, 3 U.S. senators, 3 state governors, 30 judges, 100 lawyers, 56 doctors, 75 military officers, 100 missionaries, 80 held public office, 3 mayors, and 1 comptroller. And instead of costing the government, they made many millions of dollars and contributed to society. And just shows you what can happen in the spiritual foundations, or some, you know, versus non-spiritual foundations.
Yes.
What it can do in a life. So
Yes, there's a drastic difference.
absolutely.
Yes, God makes a wonderful improvement in any situation, and in the family, it's just remarkable.
And let me just say something about the family. You know, when we talk about these 7 cultural spheres, the family is really the foundational mountain. It is the place where the well-being of the family grows, and we're seeing a disintegration of that today. And a lot of the ills that we're seeing now surface in the family is because of the breakdown of marriage. And as a result of that, we're seeing, you know, confused role identities, confused sexual identities, and a lot of things that are penetrating society that is really a result of even in the church, of the breakdown of the family and marriages.
Yes. All right, and let's talk about government a little bit. We all know, or at least in the Christian world, we know that our nation was formed on godly principles. Can you give us some of the quotes that were made by our founding fathers that really prove that point?
Yeah, well, there's a whole chapter in my book on government, and I wrote this chapter differently than the other chapters. I wrote it as a fictional account of a New York Times writer writing about what was taking place in the year 2070. And at that time we had very little influence, spiritual influence, and so he's going back to look at what made our nation great. And so he started doing all this research, and so I quote a lot of the founding fathers. But here's one quote that's probably key to everything when you just want to look at how America was founded. 94% of all the quotes of the founders had their origin in the Bible. And so when we look at our nation, it clearly was had a foundation that was rooted in wanting to have a nation that was rooted in the principles and foundations of God in the Scriptures. Even our textbooks for our children were rooted. They had to read Scriptures in order to learn spelling and reading. So this chapter really identifies all of the root foundations that really what our nation was about. And today what we find is a revisionism going on, where many people are trying to rewrite history and try to say that we were not founded as a Christian nation, and yet we certainly were. And this whole thing of separation of church and state drives me crazy.
Yes.
All that was a letter that was written to Jefferson saying, we don't want to be one denomination, as a nation.
Right.
They didn't want to be part of the Catholic Church as one denomination. What he was really saying is that, and Jefferson wrote, yeah, that's true. We're not going to, but we do want God in the public square. It's just that we don't want one denomination leading the thing.
Yes.
And if you ask people what that means, it's totally different than what the context was.
Yes. So it was really so that government wouldn't rule over the church.
Yeah, I mean it's the whole aspect that there was freedom of speech, freedom of religion, not freedom from religion.
Right.
So that you could exercise your faith. And it was definitely a Christian faith that they were talking about in that context.
Yes. And I think today sometimes we have gotten just really scared about that, and we even make some rules saying that we won't allow Christians to do certain things in fear of other religions wanting to do it, when I think that fear is just way out of control.
Yeah. Well, and we have on every currency,
In God we trust.
In God we trust. That was our motto. And yet we have a contradiction in, having that actually be read in public schools or different places, and yet it's on our currency. So we're living a contradictory life in America today.
We are. And let's talk about arts and entertainment and people who have been change agents in arts and entertainment. And arts and entertainment is so important because there are so many people that look to entertainers and people in sports and admire them and want to pattern their life after them. But you've got a story about Justin Bieber at Daystar Church in your book with Johnny Enlow. Will you share that with us?
Well, Johnny was the pastor of the church, and I was a member there, and we were good friends, and we were both teaching about this area of faith, the 7 cultural spheres or cultural mountains, and he was teaching one night in his church, and he was talking about arts and entertainment, and then God spoke to him and just made this statement. He said, God is going to raise up young people into this area. And they're going to be change agents in the culture. And so at the end of the service, a woman came up and had her 12-year-old son there, and that was Justin Bieber and her mom, Patty. And of course, God has really used them. And of course, we also know that Justin's still a teenager, and he's
Yes.
acting like a teenager at times. And so
Yeah.
we all need to pray for him so he doesn't end up like some of these others who started well in their Christian faith. So we really need to pray for him and his mom and those who go in arts and entertainment, because it's a very difficult place to really live your faith there and not compromise what God may want you to be there.
Yes, and when Johnny gave that message, Justin's mother recognized that they were going to be part of that, didn't she?
She did.
Yeah.
She came up that day and said, "We are part of that." And
Yes.
of course, that was before anybody knew of young Justin.
And you also called Tyler Perry a change agent. Tell me about Tyler and the impact that he's made in arts and entertainment.
Well, Tyler Perry has a real deep faith and came out of a very abusive situation in his own family life, and tried to get funding in Hollywood for the films that he wanted to do, and he couldn't do it, and so he went a different route, and he's an amazing story of success, both
Yes.
in the natural realm and the spiritual realm, and he's very clear about his own faith and his faith in Christ, and he's really a change agent that's doing a lot of great things now.
Yes, he is. And then you mentioned Carrie Underwood.
Yes, she, American Idol.
Yes.
And she came out of singing in her Baptist church, and that's where her roots were, and she seems to be being able to balance that quite well in her career and being faithful to who she is, and so she's a great role model.
Yes, and I'm seeing a lot more Christian people on Facebook that have talent, that are coming out and being recognized, and when they receive their awards, then they are giving God credit for that, and that's really amazing, because he did give us the talent.
Well, we've got some great things going on in Hollywood right now. God opened the door for us to do things in Hollywood in 2010.
Yes.
And I was just telling you, this week I was over at Pinewood Studios, right up the road here in Fayetteville, Georgia. A 700-acre facility is being built that's going to start opening in January of 2014. And Pinewood Studios is one of the largest studios in the world. They did Harry Potter and what was the other movie I was telling you about?
I can't remember.
But many of the movies, James Bond,
Yes.
many of the movies you would know about, they've done in those studios.
Yes.
And so they are actually partnering with Chick-fil-A in Atlanta to do this studio. And it's going to be a great opportunity for a lot of the Christian filmmakers to be able to make movies there and to bring an industry in Atlanta. In fact, we're going to be the second largest, we already are, the second largest production square footage in America, just behind Hollywood.
Yes.
So there's a future that's happening here in Georgia that is going to be very exciting.
Yeah, that makes me excited. I can feel that God is doing something right here in Georgia, and we're going to impact the nation and
the world.
And the world, yes. And that just really delights me. And we were talking also about the church in Albany, Georgia, that has come up in the arts and entertainment world with Christian movies. That was Sherwood.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and they did Facing the Giants and Fireproof and
Courageous.
Courageous.
Yeah.
And those movies were box office hits. So that was one church that came up to be a change agent.
Yeah.
In arts
and they've really grown. At first they've been really criticized by people in Hollywood for the lack of professionalism and quality, but they've improved that with every movie.
Yes.
So now the last one was so much better than all the other ones, and so I give it to them that they're very committed to doing a quality product, and it has a very good spiritual message to it.
Yes, the content was always excellent in those films, and of course there was the Passion of the Christ.
the Passion of the Christ has really changed the landscape, you know, in terms of opening the door for more spiritual and faith-based films.
Yes.
And there's many, many more faith-based films now coming out and will continue to come out. God is raising up a whole generation of young people going into Hollywood who have a strong faith. And I think we're going to see more and more product come out that's something that we really want to see and go see. You know?
Yes, and Fox Faith came forth because of that, because they realized there was a large audience out there that wanted to see good, wholesome films, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Let's go to media. And I know that you were talking to somebody who is high up in the media realm, and he told you that 100 people really control media.
Yeah, it was interesting. She produced the nightly news of a particular network, and we were walking through the studio, and she said, you know, it's less than 100 people that actually control all this media. And it used to be something like 60 companies. It's now only 6 companies that control the entire media in the world. And so that's pretty amazing. When we talk about, you know, when we talk about community impact, it used to be that people would say, well, if we had more Christians in the culture, we would change the culture. And that's only partially true, because what we found is that we have to have people of faith and morals at the tops of these cultural mountains, and it only takes 3 to 5% of a group of people to actually shift a cultural mountain.
Yes.
And the proof of that is what you see going on with the gay rights movement. You see a very small percentage of people shifting everything. Your perception of their cause in the last 10 years has shifted, you know, primarily because what they're doing in arts and entertainment and also media.
Yes, and that's real encouraging to us to know that it has to be only 3 to 5%, right?
That's right.
At the tops of the mountains. And what I've experienced when I've looked into society just here in Troup County is that God has people on the mountains in each one of those areas, like the low parts of the mountains and the middle parts of the mountains and the top of the mountains. And so in leadership, so we just need to increase the number of people that are in the top of the mountain or the leadership positions of the mountain, or to have those people who are already there, who are Christians, realize they're change agents.
Absolutely.
And step out into what God's called them to.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we need to raise up our young people to have a vision for going into these areas so that they can have an influence there. And, you know, so don't shy away from it, but go into these areas.
Yes. And tell me a little bit about the Graphic Truth.
Well, you know, years ago, back in the 80s, there was an organization called the Graphic Truth, and I always loved what their vision was, but they were before their time. And what they were trying to do is present through media things that the culture was wrestling with, you know. And we've got a lot of issues that the media is wrestling with, from, you know, whether you can have an absolute truth or relativism.
Yes.
You're dealing with, you know, what is marriage, you know, today, and all these issues. And so what this organization was doing at that time was doing very creative ads that would go on television to really challenge what people are really thinking about these issues. And so I have a vision that we're going to do that now, because you can, you know, with YouTube and the media that you can do, you can get a lot of viral messages going out there where it costs so much money beforehand to do that. It was difficult.
Yes, and you gave an example in your book about the Chinese professor.
Yeah, there was a great ad that was created in the last 2 years of showing a Chinese professor teaching his students about the indebtedness of America, and that how much we were going to be indebted to them, and they were going to be able to control our country. And you know, it's not far off from the truth if we don't get our act together in America, you know, with the debt situation and the things that we're doing. And so it was a very powerful message of just a 60-second commercial, but it made you think and it made you consider our ways.
Yes. And let's move on to business. And we're going to talk about people in business who've made an impact. And tell us about Blake McCloskey.
McCloskey, yeah. Blake, I love his story. I have it in the book. And he was a young man. He was playing polo, and I forget the country that forget the country he was in, but there was a polo field, and then there was an orphanage right next to it. And he happened to look over there and noticed that none of the kids had shoes, and so he was burdened by that, and God put in his heart to do something about it, and he created this company called Tom's Shoes. And of course, you may know about Tom's Shoes. When you buy a pair of Tom's shoes, you buy one pair for yourself and another pair for a child. And so he put entrepreneurism in the front of his business model instead of the back. You know, a lot of people, give profits from their company after they make profits, only if they make profits. But he put it in the front end. And as a result, he's really made a big difference. And so he's another example of solving a problem.
Yes.
And I like to see business people think strategically about what type of problem can they solve in society through their business expertise. And that's a great model to see right there.
I think you said that he had sent maybe 1 million pair of shoes already.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was well over that.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure when he first thought about that, he may not have even grasped that it would be that big, but it hasn't been that long. Maybe in a 4-year period, he was able to do that. And let's talk about Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and the Giving Pledge.
Well, the Giving Pledge is about, these were wealthy people that wanted to challenge others who also had wealth to give, out of their abundance and really make a commitment to that. And so they brought these various wealthy people together to make this pledge to give X number of millions and a percentage of their total wealth to nonprofit causes to really impact the world. And I'm really impressed with Bill Gates, what he's been doing over the last years to address healthcare issues over the seas. And so he's turning out to be quite a change agent himself after being so successful in business.
Yes, that was quite a fundraiser that they were invited to, but they all knew when they came to that event that they were going to be committing to give like half of their wealth away in their lifetime. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
So that is amazing.
Yeah.
That is, wow, the impact of that, how many dollars is that? It's just, wow. Let's talk about education and how education has been impacted by Christians. You talked about the Bible and its influence, the textbook. Tell us about that.
A friend of mine named Chuck Stetson in New York City, he's actually a venture capitalist and does funding for new businesses, but he has a real heart to see us impact the culture.
Yes.
And so he was really burdened about the fact that many people don't realize the impact the Bible has had on our culture. And so he decided to create a textbook that basically said, here's how the Bible influenced our world. And so instead of making it a religious, and a Christian thing, he decided to make it a historical and educational book. And so he went to all of the educational associations and got them to really support it. And they did.
Yes.
Because he basically, did it from an educational perspective. His book became a topic on the front cover of Time magazine. And it was a headline, "Should we teach the Bible in public school?" And then it had a subtitle, "Yes, but carefully," And so basically the story was about how the Bible had historically impacted every aspect of our society. And it's in over, I think, 1,500 schools today and continues to be used.
Yes. And, I know our forefathers would have never thought that that would be a question that we would ask.
Right.
Because they really wanted the Bible in the school system, and like you said, it was used to teach the subjects. So we've really come a long way in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so hopefully we're swinging back into the
Well,
right
we've got
way
a
of
long way to
thinking.
go there. The National Association of Education Association has turned very liberal in its perspective, and so we've really lost a lot of ground. And when you look, when they took prayer out of public schools,
Yes.
that has really, you can see a decline in a lot of the things that have happened in society and the problems in schools. You can tie it
Yes.
directly to, the graph. When that decision was made, you started seeing moral issues begin to show up more and more in our schools.
Yes, and the students' behavior went from maybe like chewing gum to talking and when they weren't supposed to, and those kinds of issues, to bringing guns to school. So it really went from bad behavior to way down the scale after prayer was removed from school.
Wanda, I think as we think about all of these things, what can we say to people out there and how they can be real change agents? And one of the simple ways is something, that we were talking about, I started writing called TGIF, Today God Is First.
Yes.
And that's a very simple way that people can really learn about their own journey and how to bring Christ into their own work-life call. And so if they're interested in that, they can get that at todaygodisfirst.com on the web, todaygodisfirst.com. And it's a free, daily encouragement to folks. And now goes to 200,000 folks by email. So,
Yes.
we always get letters about, how it helped them really wrestle with all the things we're talking about. How do I live it out every day?
Yes. And I just want to touch briefly on the church and say that in your book you say that the church is where the leaders on the 7 mountains gather at least once a week, and so we as the church need to begin to teach and activate people and send them out into their place of leadership to be the change agents that God has intended them to be. So I just want to say to you that I appreciate you watching You Make the Difference. I hope you found this program inspiring and encouraging, and it has confirmed to you that you are a change agent. Thank you for watching.
Got a promise from heaven. It's a year of replevin. Got a promise from heaven.